Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about this insane new poll coming out of the state of Nebraska, a state that we typically don't talk about. And this poll, especially in this video, is regarding the Senate race. This is exactly what Senate Democrats and just, of course, Democrats in general want to see. Definitely great news for Democrats. Horrible news for Republicans. But the bigger picture here, we're going to get into everything, but the bigger picture is that now Democrats in Texas and Florida prominently, but now in Nebraska, apparently, Democrats are putting Republicans on defense. They are now on the offense. And when you look at this Senate map in 2024, there's not really many places where, Democrats can go on the offense. They are more on the defense. But this is exactly what they need to do. They need to put the Republicans on the defense in some of these states. So what does this shocking new poll say? Well, this is from, now the important part is that this poll is from Survey USA, which is an established pollster. This is not an internal poll for any candidate, and that is actually the first nonpartisan poll, not an internal poll for either side. That's the first poll. This is the first poll that we're getting from this Nebraska Senate race. So in deep red Nebraska, this state voted for Trump by what? Probably 18 or 19 points, I think, near 20 points back in 2020. Now, on the presidential level, you see it's not even close, 54 to 37. But look at the Senate race. The incumbent Republican, Deb Fischer, she is up on the independent candidate. Now, Deb Fischer is at 39%. And Dan Osborne, who, again, I said, is an independent candidate. This man is not a Democrat, not a Republican, but an independent. He's a local labor union leader, someone with Kellogg workers in Nebraska. Very popular, apparently, but he is very much a progressive, right? He is, especially economically. I mean, he's a union leader, so he is very progressive, especially fiscally. And he has received the endorsement of the Nebraska Democratic Party. So the Democratic Party of Nebraska is not putting up a candidate in this race, and that is key because that then doesn't split Dan Osborne's vote share. But we see in this poll, Deb Fischer, the Republican, at 39, and 1 point behind her is Dan Osborne at 38%. Guys, this cannot be stressed enough. In a Survey USA poll, which is one of the most accurate pollsters in the nation, actually, they have a pretty high rating compared to other pollsters. This pollster, Survey USA, has the Republican candidate for Senate in deep red Nebraska up by 1 percentage point on an independent candidate. Just how insane is that? We never see that in this day and age. Maybe, maybe a decade and a half or 2 decades ago, this wouldn't be even something that we're talking about because, split ticket voting like this happens so much. But something like this is so rare. Now, as I said, this is the first nonpartisan poll that we are seeing not too long ago. About a month, or earlier this month, I should say. Dan Osborne conducted an internal poll with YouGov. That showed Deb Fischer up by 2%. And then Deb Fischer also conducted a poll earlier last month, an internal poll. Her campaign did it herself. That shows her up by 26. And then the others the 2 ones before that were internal Dan Osborne polls, even Fischer plus 4. And then a very progressive, it's a sponsor for Dan Osborne's campaign, but this poll had Dan Osborne up by 2. So the point is, this is the first poll that we have from this race that is nonpartisan, that isn't an internal poll or sponsored by either side, and it shows an extremely close race. Now again, this is exactly what Democrats need to do. In 2022 is supposed to be a huge red wave, right? And, when you look back, yes, Republicans had the opportunity to flip Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina. They had an opportunity to get 54 Senate seats, right? Or 55 even, with New Hampshire. But that one didn't even get close at all. But we failed to realize that it really wasn't even that bad of a map for Democrats when you compare the map to 2024, especially because when you look at them, five, even six, there were six really core battleground states in the 2022 Senate races. That was Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. But what was so good for Democrats, and it proved to be critical in the end, was that half of these, were held by Republicans. So the point was, it was Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. All of those seats were held by Republicans prior to 2022. They might have been running for re-election or retiring those incumbent Republican senators. And again, of course, the other three were held by Democrats. So, even though it was supposed to be a Republican-favored year, Democrats had opportunities. These battleground states were Republican held. And ultimately, what ended up happening and what benefited Democrats so much was that they did flip one of these states, that being Pennsylvania, and they actually gained a Senate seat, which did give them some slack to be able to lose, one of their other incumbent senators, which they didn't do. They held all of those seats, which allowed them to expand their majority. So, that was what was different from 2020, or that was what was positive for the Democrats, I should say, in 2022. The fact that they had opportunity to expand the map, go on the offense in some of these states. But when you look at 2024, that isn't quite as much the same, because you've got Nevada, Arizona, you've got quite a few battleground states in this election. You've got Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, then most importantly, Ohio and Montana. Now, these... I'm going to add two more for the purpose of this video, that being Texas and Florida. So you've got about 9 seats that are, not core battlegrounds. We'll see what happens after Election Day, which ones are the very closest, but 5 general battlegrounds for the Senate seats in 2024, which are the 9 toss-ups listed here. And what you notice is that 7 of these 9 are held by Democrats, and this is before we add in Nebraska. I'm getting to Nebraska. But 7 of these 9 are held by Democrats. So that means that Democrats, they have to keep they have to keep all 7. They have to keep Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Montana, and Ohio. And you might notice that they went from 51 to 50 even though they kept all their seats, and that's because of West Virginia. You've got Joe Manchin, the Democrat, retiring, not running again in 2024. So ultimately, that is an automatic flip for the Republicans. So they're already down to 50 seats, and that means they can't spare one of those 7. And I will tell you right now, Montana is an extremely uphill battle. They voted for Donald Trump by 16 points in the last election. Jon Tester, the Democrat here, is not very likely to keep his Senate seat. And then you've got, not an uphill battle, I think he's favored, but you've got a tough race for Democrat Sherrod Brown in Ohio. I mean, these are 2 incumbent Democratic senators in deeply Republican states. We typically don't see that, but whatever. Now, again, that's 50 seats if they keep it. But again, I doubt they can hang on to Montana. I really doubt it. I don't have Jon Tester winning. And when you look at the polling, yes, we have less polls in Nebraska, but Dan Osborne in Nebraska is polling better than Jon Tester in Montana. He is. So that could be a closer race than Montana, honestly. And then you've got Texas and Nebraska, 2 Republican states, or 2 Republican-held Senate seats that I do think they will win again. So that puts Republicans at 51 seats with their win in Montana. Now, if they lose Montana, that means that Democrats, to keep the Senate, the minimum or the maximum seats they can possibly get is 50, right? They're not keeping 51. We know that. But to get to 50, Democrats would also, they can win majority with 50 seats because the vice presidency, the VP casts the tie-breaking vote when a tie occurs. So technically, if Tim Walz is VP, Democrats do have majority in the Senate. They have Senate control, I should say. So that means that Democrats have to go on the offense in some of these states. I just don't see it in Montana. I think that the Texas race will be a lot closer than Montana, and we're approaching a point where even Florida could get closer than Montana. I really think that the Republican in Montana has it in the bag. So, you've got Texas, you've got Florida. Those are possible, but it's even better for Democrats when they have Nebraska up for grabs. I mean, and yes, I know he's an independent, and I put him as a Democrat, but I don't know. I bet he wouldn't caucus with the Democrats officially because that would mean that he would lose when Dan Osborne runs for re-election. But I really think he would be a strong progressive voice in the Senate, and I'm just going to characterize him as a Democrat for the purpose of this video. But you got Nebraska, and that's 50 seats. So Nebraska matters so much. If Democrats don't win Nebraska, then their next best bet is Texas. And it's Texas. Do we see it flipping Republican? I don't know about that. So Nebraska, it matters so much, surprisingly. But I wouldn't get too confident. Yes, it's this part of the video. So let's take a look at the state of Montana in 2020. So the point that I'm about to try to make here, and you can keep this in mind, is that polling always overestimates voters' split ticket voting. So split ticket voting is, voting for one party on the presidential level, say, and then voting for the other party on the Senate level. So in Nebraska, it would be, obviously, in this poll, Trump is crushing Harris, so you've got a bunch of people voting Republican on the presidential level, and then voting for the progressive Dan Osborne on the Senate level. So you typically see that in polling. It seems to be overestimated in polling, and then come election day, very few voters do that. That is extremely uncommon. In 2016 and 2020, in both of those years, there was only one Senate race that went the other way on the same ballot as the presidential election went. That was in Maine in 2020 with moderate Susan Collins. So, for example, in Montana, it way overestimated Steve Bullock. It way overestimated the way that people would split ticket vote. I mean, the only accurate pollster was Emerson that had Steve Daines, the Republican, up by 9. Steve Bullock was leading in many, many, many of these polls. So, and then I didn't show you guys this, but Steve Daines went on to win by 10 points. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even close at all. So polling may overestimate Dan Osborne because they may overestimate, or voters are more friendly to the idea of voting, of a split ticket voting, and then when they actually get to the polling booth, they never do. So, that is what we need to look out for, but it'll be very interesting to see polling in this race, through this election, and how it changes if it does remain close. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe down below. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before Election Day. So if you could help me out with that, that would be great. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later.